Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few backs I looked at off the wire this week. The first back, Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan Mason, it looks like he might step right back in to the starting job for this 49er team after Christian McCaffrey got off to a great start in that Sunday night ball game at the Buffalo Bills and then went down with a knee injury and didn't return in that ball game. Mason out there in 58% of fantasy leagues, and he finished up the game in the second half, 13 carries, 78 yards. So beginning of the year when he started for Christian McCaffrey, he had some good ball games. Week 1 versus Jets, 28 carries, 147 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 at Minnesota, 20 carries, 100 yards, a touchdown. And then after that, he started all the way to Week 8 where Christian McCaffrey came back after the bye week in Week 10. So right now, Jordan Mason possibly could be a league winner for fantasy owners out there in 58% of fantasy leagues. And he's going to be the hottest pickup easily off the waiver wire this week. The next running back, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So Charbonnet out there in 60% of fantasy leagues. And Zach Charbonnet, we know he's been a good running back. He's one of the better handcuff running backs in all fantasy football. Out there in 60% of fantasy leagues. Now, the last few weeks, he didn't do much until Week 13. He found the end zone at the New York Jets. Week 9 versus the Rams, 2 carries, 8 yards, 2 catches, 25 yards. Week 11 at the Niners, 4 carries, 3 yards, 2 catches, 2 yards. Week 12 versus Arizona, 6 carries, 22 yards. And Week 13 at the Jets, 4 carries, 28 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 13 yards. So Charbonnet as a handcuff and one of the better handcuff backs in the league. I would go out there. I'd end him as a fantasy owner, especially as the Kenneth Walker owner, because if Walker goes down with injury, we've seen what Charbonnet is capable of going back to early in the season and 2 early starts. He got Week 2 in New England, 14 carries, 38 yards, a touchdown, 5 catches, 31 yards. In Week 3 versus the Dolphins, 18 carries, 91 yards in that ball game, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 16 yards. So as a handcuff running back and one of the best in the league, definitely someone to keep on the radar this late in the year. And add off the wide, next running back, Sincere McCormick of the Las Vegas Raiders. McCormick out there in 99% of fantasy leagues, and he was the lead back in the Week 13 tough loss versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So McCormick, the last 2 weeks, we've seen him in the lineup. Zamir White, Alexander Madison, they've been out the last few weeks. And at this point of the season, Raiders probably want to see what McCormick has. Week 12 versus Denver in that ball game, 5 carries, 33 yards. In Week 13 at the Chiefs, expanded role, 12 carries, 64 yards. 2 catches, 1 yard. So him and Amir Abdul has been the running backs the last couple weeks for this Raider team. And honestly, they've been better running backs, in my opinion, than what Alexander Madison and Zamir White were doing this season. So this week, a good matchup coming up at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Give up the 7th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And McCormick showed he could run between the tackles, even though he's a smaller back. So right now, this part of the season, it's tough to find running backs that get a full workload. And McCormick's out there, like I said, in 99% of fantasy leagues. Next back, Amir Abdullah, his teammate of the Vegas Raiders. So Abdullah, the last couple weeks, he's gone out there and he's made the most of his opportunities and been a decent option for fantasy owners in this Raider team. Week 11 at Miami, a carry, 1 yard, 3 catches, 16 yards, found the end zone. Week 12 versus Denver, 8 carries, 28 yards, 5 catches, 37 yards, a touchdown. And Week 13 at the Chiefs, 10 carries, 39 yards, 2 catches, 14 yards, and 2 targets. So like I said, with a good matchup of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they can't stop anyone all season long, give up the 7th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. I think Abdullah could go out there, have a decent ball game, and if they're trailing early and often to this high-powered Tampa Bay offense, they're going to be throwing the football a lot, and Abdullah's at least had 7 more fantasy points the last 3 weeks in PPR leagues. So definitely a running back I would go out there and get this week. The next back, Cam Akers of the Minnesota Vikings. So Cam Akers, the last couple weeks, he's been more involved in this offense. Aaron Jones, besides that Week 12 ball game at the Chicago Bears, his snaps have gone down, and I think they're trying to preserve him a little bit, is this Minnesota Viking team, for the playoff push. And that's obviously the right thing to do, I believe, as well, because we know Jones, he's missed some time over the last 2 seasons with the Green Bay Packers. So Cam Akers, he got some work and more snaps he got in the Week 13 game where Aaron Jones was in the doghouse a little bit, where he fumbled early in the game and dropped a touchdown in the back of the end zone. So the last few weeks here for Akers, Week 11 in Tennessee, 10 carries, 25 yards, 2 catches, 11 yards, a touchdown. Week 12 at the Bears in that one, 3 carries, 19 yards, a catch, 6 yards. And Week 13 versus the Cardinals, 4 carries, 22 yards. I know the numbers aren't eye-popping, but I believe he's one of the better handcuff backs in the league is Cam Akers, and we've seen him have some success with this Minnesota Viking team. A little bit last season, and obviously a parts this season. So right now, well, he's out there in 81% of fantasy leagues. And like I said, one of the better handcuff backs in the league. He's someone to add if you have room on your roster. Next back, Ray Davis to the Buffalo Bills. So Ray Davis, one of the better handcuff running backs, in pro football, I believe. And we've seen flashes from him when he had expanded roles early in the season when James Cook was out with a little bit of an injury. But week 13, he had some early touches in the game, found the end zone, even though we know James Cook went over 100 yards and found the end zone. So week 13, 11 carries, 63 yards, a touchdown, a catch, 4 yards. And week 14 is a good matchup with the Los Angeles Rams. But like I said, James Cook, he had garbage time towards the end of the game. Obviously, though, he had that early touchdown in the first quarter for this Buffalo Bill team in week 13. At this point of the season, you're just handcuffing your top running backs just in case something happens to them. At least you have the backup and you plug them right into the lineup. So Davis out there in tons of fantasy leagues at 83%. And to be honest, if he was on, let's say, 10, 15 different teams, he could be a starter. I believe that's the talent Ray Davis has, catching the football out of the backfield, physical in between the tackles. And right now, if you need the handcuff running back, will want to take a flyer if something happens to Cook. Davis, like I said, out there in 83% of fantasy leagues. Next back, Kamini Vidal of the Los Angeles Chargers. We know J.K. Dobbins, he's out for the rest of the regular season with his injury. And Vidal was operating as the number 2 running back for the Los Angeles Chargers in the Week 13 win at the Atlanta Falcons. Vidal, early in the season, he had a little bit of a role. His best game was Week 6 at Denver, 4 carries, 11 yards, 2 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. And then back in action here, Week 13 at the Atlanta Falcons, 4 carries, 20 yards. Obviously, that's nothing on the ground by Kamini Vidal, but he still went out there as the number 2 back. Hassan Haskins, he had 1 carry, he fumbled that. And Gus Edwards, we know he's not a receiving back out of the backfield. So if he could get that third down work and passing downs work, I think Vidal could be a decent flex option down the line for fantasy owners, where he only got out-touched 7-4 by Gus Edwards. I know it was a close game throughout, but like I said, Vidal's getting opportunities, and he's the number 2 back. And he was a 6th-round pick rookie coming into the year, so the Chargers definitely want to see what he has, and he's available in 84% of fantasy leagues. And the final running back I look to get off the wire is Isaac Guerrero of the San Francisco 49ers. So Jordan Mason, I think he's going to be the workhorse, with Guerrero mixing in 4 or 5 touches per game. But Jordan Mason, we also know he had a shoulder injury before Christian McCaffrey came back. And Guerrero, he had some opportunities, and he made the most of it. Week 6, when he went down with injury, was Mason in that game in Seattle, 10 carries, 99 yards. And then Week 8 versus the Dallas Cowboys, I know that ball game was out of reach at points of it, but he had 14 carries, 85 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 17 yards when Mason went down. And then Week 13 at Buffalo, obviously Mason, he had a big workload and he needed a breather, but Guerrero found the end zone on 4 carries, 19 yards, and a touchdown and a catch, negative 3 yards. So Guerrero, a lot of speed, a lot of power, no doubt about it. And that's why this Niner team took him in the NFL draft this season. Now, most likely Christian McCaffrey, I don't think he's going to come back this season with that PCL injury in terms of fantasy football. Maybe playoffs if they make it, but they're 5-7 on the year, need to go on a run. So Guerrero, if you can't get Jordan Mason, I would get Guerrero, because like I said, Mason, he's been banged up as well this season with the shoulder injury, and Guerrero out there in 98% of fantasy leagues, and he definitely has burst and upside in my opinion. So that's a few running backs I looked at off the wire in a loaded running back week on the wire for the first time in a while, Week 14 of the fantasy football season.